Hi, I'm Brandy. Thanks for stopping by my channel. In this video, we're going to be taking this coffee table and updating it to give it a second life. So I got this table off of Facebook Marketplace for free, and it's got some scratches on the top here, and it's kind of wobbly as well, so it definitely needs to be made a little bit more sturdy. But all in all, it was in pretty good shape, and I was excited to get to work on it. So the first thing I did in preparation was I removed all of the hardware, which was just two handles basically. So I took out those screws, removed the handles, and then I threw everything into a Ziploc bag so that everything was together and nothing would get lost. So here is where you could see that it's wobbly, and it was also super dirty. So the first thing we need to do always before we start working on projects is just make sure to thoroughly clean the furniture. So I just used some Dawn dish soap and water and gave it a complete scrub down. And once I was done scrubbing it down with the soap and water, I went back through with a just a wet rag just to wipe everything clean. I was on babysitting duty, and my goddaughter Shenandoah was just super excited to be helping out. She also wanted to say hi to the camera, so there she is. So once everything was washed, rinsed, and dried, we brought it outside, threw on some 150 grit sandpaper on my hand sander, and went over the top of the table as well as the second layer down below, as those were the two areas that I planned to apply stain. And because I'm applying stain, I'm making sure to sand in the same direction as the grain of the wood is going. And this sure did take a while to get both layers sanded down. So a lot of patience, but I was happy with the outcome later. Once I was done with sanding both the top and the bottom, I brought it inside, flipped it over, and was trying to figure out what was causing the wobble. And it turns out that there was only one screw holding this whole entire side. So I went ahead and removed it because I knew I was going to have to go to the hardware store and get a few more roughly the same size to fit into the holes that were already there. So I took out one screw from the side, and as you can see, there are 4 holes. So it needed 4 screws, like this other side over here that actually had all 4. But this side only had 1, so that was definitely what was causing the wobble. Mystery solved. I went ahead and went to the hardware store, picked up a few other similar screws to get this thing fixed. So once we were back with our new screws, we went ahead and got those into the holes. They fit perfectly. Once everything was done, there was no more wobble. So super stoked about that. Once we were done dealing with that, flipped it over. This is how it looked after that thorough sanding on the top layer and the second one. I also did a quick scuff sanding along the sides where I planned to just paint. And then I came in with some painter's tape to tape off the border, because this was a veneer that was on the top and the bottom here, and I planned on staining it. However, the edge along it would not have taken to the stain very well, so I planned on just painting the edge and then staining just that flat top surface. So I went ahead and just taped off the edges. So the base of the table was painted in a Behr chalk paint in the color Classic Noir. I think that's how you pronounce it, Noir. Classic Noir. It's a very matte black color. I love the way it looked. I actually painted my bathroom vanity in this color, and my friend who was getting this coffee table from me had actually requested to do the black with the wood to match her decor her house. So I was excited to be able to use this color again. It is a very beautiful black color, as you can see here. So I went ahead and started using just an edge brush here, just to kind of get in those little smaller spots to apply the first layer of chalk paint. So first layer, it's going on thin. I'm not really worried about which direction I'm going, just getting the color on there for the first coat is the most important, and that's what I did here. After the first coat was on, we let it dry. After it had dried for about an hour and a half, came back in with some 220 grit sandpaper just to do a light sanding in between coats. I always make sure to do a light sanding between each coat after it dries and before applying the next coat, just so you make sure to smooth out any imperfections before applying the next coat of paint. After sanding, came in with some tack cloth just to wipe everything down, any leftover dust or residue from that light sanding. You definitely don't want it to get trapped in the next coat of paint, so tack cloth is very beneficial for that. It's sticky and it just kind of picks those things up really quickly. I stored my brushes in a Ziploc bag in the fridge so I didn't have to wash them between coats. So I just pulled everything out and applied the second coat of paint. I did a total of 3 coats of the black on the body of the table, and then again just allowing for dry time in between coats and doing that light 220 grit sanding between coats as well. But yeah, 3 total coats of the black. And this is what it looked like after 3 coats had been applied and dried. So now it was time to take off the tape and see how well that line stood up against the paint. I was pretty happy. The line was pretty crisp and clean. I didn't need to go back in for any touch-ups, so I was super happy that it didn't leak through the tape, which oftentimes it does when you're trying to create lines and stuff like that. So now I was going to go the opposite way, and I was basically going to tape off the areas that I had applied the paint, because now I was getting ready to put the wood conditioner down and then ultimately stain the top and bottom layer. And I definitely didn't want that stain to then bleed into what I just painted. So taped it off the opposite way. So now I was ready to apply my pre-stained wood conditioner. It's a water-based conditioner by Behr. Gave it a quick, thorough stirring. I added it to my little container, and then I just applied it on all of the surface where I planned to put stain. So you leave this on for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then you can come back in with a lint-free rag and wipe away any excess that's left over prior to staining it. once that was all done, I was ready to get my stain on. I used the water-based Stain and Poly Satin by Behr. And as I'm stirring it, it looks pink, but the color is definitely not going to be pink. So once you give it a good stir, then I just used a brush to go ahead and apply it in a very thin layer. Because it already has the poly in it, I wasn't going to have to come back over with that final coat of poly, which I was excited about, but at the same time I was kind of nervous. It was my first time using the Stain and Poly, and I was worried about, you know, overworking it or underworking it, leaving streaks and so forth. But for the first coat here, I was having a hard time figuring out how to do it with all the grain going the opposite way, so I just worked in sections, and I did, you know, one of these triangles, and then I moved on to the next triangle, and then here's what it looked like after it had dried for some time. So after it had dried for some time, I came back in with a 400 grit sandpaper and went over it just to smooth things out before applying the second coat. So again, in between each coat, I did the 400 grit sanding, and then I wiped everything off with a tack cloth to get, you know, all that dust and dirt off of there before applying the next coat. So when I first started applying coat number 2, I was doing the same method as I had on coat number 1, where I planned on just working in sections of these triangles. Right after I had basically completed one triangle and was moving on to the corner of the next one, I suddenly realized that what I could do is just go in one direction all the way around the edge, and as you get to that edge, you turn the brush and it follows along with the brush strokes. So that's what I did for coat number 2 and 3. I first did the outer layer, and then I moved in another layer, and I did that until I reached the center, and that actually worked out really, really good, and I didn't have those brush strokes that were kind of ending at each other in the creases of the design on the table. So I was happy that that worked out. So after the third coat had fully dried, I was ready to take off the tape and take a look at everything and see how it all came together. And it really came together good. They're very similar to when I painted it. You know, no paint got where the stain should have been, and vice versa. No stain got where the paint should have been. So I was super happy about that. So I just went over it again with that 400 grit sandpaper just to give that final smooth to the touch feel on that stained section.
So then I went through with some sandpaper and started scuffing up the edges of everything. My friend really wanted it to have that distressed look, so that's what I did. Using some sandpaper, went through and anywhere where it looked like it would naturally get scuffed is where I did that distressing. I really liked the contrast of the light coming through the dark. So after I had distressed everything, I came in with some decorative wax in the clear that was from Behr, and I just globbed that onto a lint-free rag here, and then I wiped it on and buffed it into or onto the paint, and that gave it a very matte but sheen protective cover. So once all the wax had dried, I applied the hardware, and we were finished. So I put the drawers back in, and then I staged it for some photos. I was really happy with how it turned out. My friend said that she was excited to pick it up. So another successful makeover here. And at the very end, I went ahead and put a picture of the before, just as a reminder of what it looked like before we made it over. And thank you for stopping by. Please like and subscribe for future content.